Building Appeals Board for November 2nd, 2016. Secretary, will you do roll call?
Yes, please. Bill Ulrich.
Present.
Tom Farmer.
Here.
Chair Daddy.
Present.
Judy Murphy. Judy Murphy's absent. And myself, Dale Hansen. Here.
Bill, will you do the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public communication is the time set aside during the Building Appeals Board meeting for members of the public to address the Building Appeals Board on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters arise at this time may be briefly discussed by the board and will generally be referred to the staff and are placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action or on non-agendized items may be taken at this meeting. Consent items. Minutes of the Building Appeals Board from August 15, 2016. We have any comments, additions, corrections? Do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I move that we accept the minutes.
I second. Roll call.
Roll call. Mr. Ulrich.
Aye.
Tom
Yes.
Farmer. Chair Daddy. And myself.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, on public communication, do we have any public communication on an item other than what's on this board agenda for today?
Well, not on that item.
No, not on.
2, 3, and 4.
No, that's fine. Okay, then, item 2, we have Wayne Maynard. Mr. Maynard, item 2.
If it's possible, I'd like to wait until I hear what the proposal is. I just had the agenda item. I don't know what, I have an idea what it's about, but
Okay, well, then I
Okay,
guess
I
what
mean-
we'll do is we'll go ahead and,
if that's okay with you, it's just, I mean, you want me to give comments on something, I really don't know what the issue is.
well, I mean, I'll tell you what it is, and you may have it. It's review and discuss proposed amendments and provide a recommendation to City Council for said codes. And so we can go ahead and talk about all the different codes and the recommendations. And if you'd like to come in at the end of that and discuss, then that's fine.
Is that fine? Okay, I'd like to.
Yeah,
hear
you know what?
discussions.
We're here to just help the community the best we can and get the most out of all this stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so sure, that would be fine. I'm going to put your card back so we can recall that. Okay, well, I guess what I will do is, we have, since this last board, a new building official. And I would like to give the building official, or actually the city manager, an opportunity to introduce the building official and then have the building official say any words that they think would be pertinent.
Thank you. I'd be happy to do so. And I suppose out of a matter of formality, even though I think you all know me, I should probably also introduce myself because I don't think I formally appeared before this board. I am also the new city manager, Steve McClary. And I'm happy to introduce to my right Renee Mario, who is serving as the city's building official. Renee is with Charles Abbott Associates. We are now under contract with their firm to provide building and safety and code enforcement services to the city. Without any further ado, I will turn it over to Ms. Mario to give a brief introduction to the board.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Renee Mario. I'm the building official for the city of Ojai. I come from the company Charles Abbott Associates, and we serve primarily Southern California with offices in Georgia and Colorado. I have about 20 years of experience.
Is that my question?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, microphone wasn't on. I'll start over. My name is Renee Mario, building official for the city of Ojai. I work for a company called Charles Abbott Associates, which has offices throughout Southern California, Georgia, Nevada. I have about 20 years of experience in building inspection and code enforcement. Been a building official for about 10 of those years, and I'm happy to meet you.
Thank you. What I guess I'd like to do is this is a pretty lengthy packet, it's a pretty big packet, but I also see that it appears to be printed 3 times in the same packet with little revisions and different things going on. And I'd like to go through and ask questions. I don't have any really answers or recommendations or anything, but I do have a number of questions. So if we could go through some questions, I would like the board to be specific to when we get to any sections that you have some questions. And if you have some questions where you want to start out on item 2, then let's get those asked up front so we can get those out of the way and pick this thing up. Okay, so do we have any specific questions? Any specific items? Okay, I have some specific questions, and we have the state, and I know we've not gotten into this, but we have a new state interjection, SB 1069, that has certain regulations. So I'm just going to kind of throw that out. I don't think we're going to answer anything today, but the state has come up with a number of items that either liberalize or enhance second units. And this is going to take effect January 1st. I think that if no action is taken, since we're a general law city, there's really nothing for us to do on that on the building side as far as I'm concerned. Is that correct, Mr. McClary?
So yeah, let me allow to clarify a little bit on that. You're talking about the Senate bill that is changing the some of the minimum requirements for permitting second units, and that is changing some of the rules that cities can apply. And you are correct that there is some urgency on part of local governments if they want to maintain some of their other rules and regulations regarding second units that are not being wiped out by this Senate bill. We were recently apprised of this matter by the city attorney, and we took an item to the city council at the most recent meeting to get direction from the council, including moving forward with an urgency ordinance that would need to be in effect before the end of the year so that the city would be able to keep in some of its specific regulations in place. Obviously, we can't trump the minimums or maximums set by state code, but there are other provisions in the city's second unit guidelines and rules which can remain in effect with this Senate bill, but it does require some action by the city before the end of the year. And as I stated, the council took action on an urgency ordinance at its last meeting and also gave direction and introduced a non-urgency ordinance and gave direction to the Planning Commission to work on that and bring that back to the city council. The council did not give any direction to the Building Appeals Board to review the matter. And unfortunately, we do not have it on for discussion tonight. But if the Building Appeals Board would like to put that on for a future agenda discussion, the board could certainly do that. Obviously, we would need to get concurrence from council before the board could do any direct work on that. So I don't think that necessarily reflects back to the agenda item at hand. But if there's something we're missing, or I'm happy to answer any questions on that, I'd be happy to do so.
Okay, I guess I have a question, because I don't see where we're really going to be involved in making any changes to this particular bill. I don't really see that unless the city makes some real swings. I don't really see that this is something that we're going to have a party in taking care of. I do have a question, though. Is there a time frame from the time the city adopts it until it is in effect, or if the city adopts it, whatever sovereignty issues they're looking to keep? If they adopt it, is that effective immediately, and then this just rolls into January 1 when the rest of the law takes care?
More or less, yeah. That is why the city went forward with the urgency ordinance. And there is a, I don't have the calendar here in front of me, but we did work that out, and that was part of the action that the council took at the last meeting, was to adopt the urgency ordinance and then to move forward on the non-urgency ordinance so that we would not have that gap, because obviously, as you know, a non-urgency ordinance requires 30 days before it can generally take effect. That's not the issue with the urgency ordinance. So by adopting the urgency ordinance, we've been able to cover that gap.
Okay, then I'm going to make the assumption that unless we get a direct request through you from council, that we have nothing to concern ourselves with, and this matter is really not for this board. As far as 1069 specific.
That's my understanding at this time, unless the council gives direction or the board wishes to take it up in discussion.
Okay.
I have a question about.
Is your mic on?
And perhaps I misread it, but it's my understanding that should the city not adopt a revised second unit ordinance that is in conformance with the state, in all manners that the state diverges from the existing Ojai second unit, that the Ojai second unit ordinance is rendered null and void in its entirety?
That is my exact understanding, and I questioned that as well. We had numerous discussions with the city attorney on that point, and that was exactly the first thing that leapt to my mind, which was, okay, that's fine. We understand we can't trump those things in state law, state code. We understand that, but what about those things that
You can
that we could
regulate,
So,
yes. Okay.
But yeah, that was the answer that we received, that there is not a way to separate those out, which was a bit of a surprise.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you for the question. It's a good question. So, go ahead.
Would
Sorry.
it be premature then for us, depending on what we do with the rest of this, to make a recommendation that until we have all the information and know what we can do and what the other agencies can do, that the council adopt an indeterminate end of the conforming second unit program? There are going to be people out there that are going to be surprised that they may not have to put in certain other expenses, that they may not have to do other types of items. And we have had in the past people hesitant to follow through because of the time issue they were concerned with, any additional expense. So I'm not currently up to date exactly on when the second unit conforming now, not the other second unit, just the conforming, sunsets. So I'll leave that to you. I would think that they would want to take a look at that and see how long it's going to be to get the rest of the information back. So we don't want to dissuade anybody from doing it, and they stop, and then they find out later that, hey, they could have saved $20,000 or $30,000 of charges, which is what stopped them from doing this. And they're looking at the time horizon, and they stop. So that's my only thought. I don't know how you enter that discussion with them, but that's my only thought on that one. Tom?
Yes, Steve, I have a question. Will any of the current applicants at this point that are in the wings, will they be advised of this new SB 1096? Will they become aware of it, or are they?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to
Yeah.
check with the community development staff.
Yeah.
We really were not prepared to have a
Yeah,
lengthy discussion about that since it's not on the agenda.
okay, thanks.
Oh, no, I didn't want to have a discussion. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Having read your packets, have you got any questions? Have you got any place you'd like to start? Mr. McClary, would you like to?
Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you. I'll try to be brief, and I know we have the fire marshal here, and he would like a few moments to present to the board, and then I will ask our building official if she has anything to add as well. So this is for amendments to the 2016 building code as proposed by the County of Ventura Fire Department. We are asking for a recommendation to be provided for the City Council for its consideration. The state's health and safety code requires local governments to adopt the most recent editions of the model codes related to construction, but provides for local amendments if findings are met. Code includes building, residential, plumbing, electrical, mechanical, green building standards, energy, and other related codes. Each cycle, the County of Ventura Fire Department proposes a local amendment to the building code, and they are here tonight to communicate that. The proposed changes are known and are found within Chapter 9 of the Ventura County Fire Protection District. I do want to clarify that we got a little ahead of ourselves on the agenda. We are not actually asking for the Building Appeals Board to, although they certainly could, but there's no action required in terms of Ventura County Fire Apparatus Access Code. My understanding is that does not have any building components to it. And that is doesn't require adoption by the local agency. So, California Health and Safety Code, Section 13869.7 requires the fire district to file findings and the city to adopt findings that support the need for any more restrictive building standards based on local climatic, geologic, or topographic conditions. The county has communicated their proposed findings in terms of the climatic, geological, and topographical issues that would affect Chapter 9, and they are here again to speak to that. Without any further ado, Ms. Mario, do you have anything you would like to add to the staff report?
No.
Okay. It would be my recommendation perhaps that we would invite Fire Marshal to speak at this time and present the recommendations that are coming from County Fire.
Okay. And may I ask a question of somebody that just got here? Mr. Quilisi, did you have anything for the open discussion? Okay, Mr. Fire Marshal.
I have, you
Well,
welcome to
come
step
on
up
up,
to the
please,
podium.
please come up.
Because this relates to actual, Chair Daddy had made reference to questions, and I have about 3 or 4 questions before you speak, and perhaps you can speak to them if, you know, or if you need to clarify. So it's my understanding that what's occurring here, and also I guess I can relate to it as being proposed, is that in the course of the adoption of ordinance number 29 and 30, that the existing ordinance number 27 is effectively repealed upon.
28 is repealed. Currently, we are in ordinance 28.
Well, right, but I'm looking at attachment A, page 159, says VCFPD ordinance number 27 is hereby repealed in its entirety on the effective date of this ordinance.
I don't have that, what you have in front of you, but that is not correct. It's ordinance 28. Currently, it's 28, and we are repealing.
Hence my question and interest. So that only, what you're saying is 29 and 30, upon their adoption, only effectively affects by repealing 28.
That's correct. We are repealing 28.
And what happens with 27? Maintains and...
When we, this happens every 3 years when the code changes. I was here before this board 3 years ago, and we were repealing 27, and we adopted 28. So 3 years later, which is today, we are repealing 28.
So maybe this is just...
Thank you. There's a typo. That should be 28.
Stale, whatever. Okay.
Oh,
I,
okay.
27 was repealed 3 years ago.
perfect. Okay, that answered the heck out of that question.
Sure.
Okay, then, my second question is, and this relates to some of the Well, it would actually relate to, if I understand it correctly, to even to 29, the access, want to state it.
Standard.
State it correctly, the apparatus access code, as well as some of the combustible materials components of both of these ordinances, are they presently being enforced by County Fire District within the city limits of Ojai?
Yes. Just so we're clear how this happens, just a little bit of a background. We have had only one ordinance for many years. And 3 years ago, when we repealed Ordinance 27, we adopted 28, which we are currently in. And now that the codes have changed and it's been updated, the new fire code, we decided to basically take fire apparatus access standard that was already in our code and bring it out and create its own standard, its own ordinance. And that's why Ordinance 29 is created this time for the first time to just deal with fire apparatus access. The Ordinance 30, which is the remainder of what it was in 28, is called Ordinance 30. So 29 basically took the fire apparatus access separate, the rest is 30. So everything was already in the 28, we just separated into two separate
Okay.
ordinances.
Right, so, and having said that, and you're saying that then that both the precedents to 27 and 28, and which are at this point 29 and 30, have been enforced by County Fire District within the city limits, and that would apply to apparatus access. That would apply to say someone has a stand of dead trees on their property, highly combustible dead trees. Let's say they're pine, and that's something that's being enforced by County Fire within the city limits.
The ordinance refers to wildland-urban interface areas. In the wildland-urban interface areas, those are fire hazard reductions that are done by the ordinance.
Excuse me, I don't believe that the combustible materials section, a component of that, is applicable exclusively to, what was that, the term of art you used?
Wildland-urban interface.
Urban interface.
Correct.
Okay, so, because I understand, having read that there was a definition for that interface itself.
Yes.
But that means, since we have only a perimeter aspect of that would comply with that definition, so what you're saying is that only, County Fire is only enforcing that at the interface and not anywhere else in the city limits.
Typically, the inner cities are enforced by the local code enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Any combustibles, any type of hazard, city code enforcement deal with those issues. When it comes to the wildland-urban interface, where we have a program of clearing those vegetations for property protection and for having a defensible space, the ordinance address those as well.
Okay. See, from my perspective, I'm just looking at I'm looking at things from the perspective of purview of different agencies. And obviously, since since you folks are providing fire services for the city versus us having our own fire department, as some other communities in the county do, that was my understanding, and you seem to be indicating that my understanding was erroneous, that the county fire has purview in the city for combustibles, for violations of the county code. And you're saying no.
No, what I'm saying is
City,
that
it's the city's code enforcement
the
folks.
city code enforcement typically deal with those hazards. We have worked with the cities throughout the county to address those issues as they come up, and we have been successful in all the issues that we have dealt with. But typically, code enforcement, city code enforcement deals with those issues as well. And that's part of that enforcement that happens.
Okay, well, see, back, I'm looking also at the same time relative to Ordinance 30, where the purview then of the county fire is everywhere in the city as far as it applies to the structural building components.
Anything that it becomes a life safety hazard, we certainly have been involved in making those corrections, clearing those violations. But what I'm saying is, it's not something we do alone. We work with the city code enforcement
Right.
to get those
And,
actions
The
done.
reason I'm bringing it up is because I'm not aware of that having occurred. So I'm just.
Well, I can tell you, you have a new city code enforcement, you have a new building official. We have worked with your new building officials, and we have a very good relationship, so I feel like you will see a much better, probably, enforcement or much better cooperation, I should say.
Yeah, okay, all right. Well, while I appreciate the intent, I'm talking about historical precedent and typical operational aspects of it. So, okay, I think that answered that question. I think I have one other, and that relates to several, in several areas in both ordinances, there's very specific requirements proposed, and several of them indicate to me that they're carryovers from the previous 27 and 28 relative to fire flows. I would hope you would be aware that we've had not only concern, but we've actually had outright failures in the city limits relative to fire suppression water supply, either actually not having been in existence, fire hydrant being opened and nothing coming out, to low pressure, to insufficient flow. And many of these components of these proposed, I'm going to call them proposed until they're adopted by the city, I guess, proposed ordinances are very specific about quite large flow rates. And our history with Golden State Water and the fire department's, I won't call it overview of the status of our fire suppression water system has indicated that I don't believe in numerous locations in this community that these fire flow rates are available or will be available. So how is that going to be addressed? Should these be adopted?
Well, just to be clear, those are already adopted, just so I
Yeah,
want to make that clear.
I know. Well, I'm looking at this current iteration. So for all, as you just referenced, we have a new building official. I'm looking at this like maybe we may wind up having a new water purveyor in the near term. But the reality of the situation is we have an existing system that's quite old, has not been maintained very well. In order to provide adequate pressure in some areas, it's operated almost typically in an overpressured condition. So I'm asking the question of how is the fire department's requirements going to sit with that? Besides, if we're adopting something that the system should be in compliance with, how are we going to get there? Or are we not going to be are we going to be making exceptions to some of these which appear to be very stringent requirements?
No, we're not making any exceptions in that regards, but here's what the code and how we have been following. The water companies are responsible for maintaining their systems to providing the fire flow. Any structures that is being proposed for building, they are required to go to the local water company and they get certified whether the water fire flow will be available for that structure, for that building. So that part is the certification by the water company saying, yes, we will provide. Is a will serve letter, we will provide water for that property, we will meet the fire flow requirements, and it's very specific what the fire flow is going to be. So water companies are pretty much know exactly what they're supposed to provide for that proposed building. And then they are required to maintain their systems as the years go by. This is something that is on their requirements. We have, and we will continue to do work with the water companies and do testing of this system on the hydrants to make sure the water is available, or make sure that there are no changes. But that is something that really truly works with the water company, and we are basically working with them. But we don't have the authority to go change their water systems or force them to change their water or change their water line. They're required to do that to meet the fire flow that they certified.
Okay, but that's for new construction. We don't do a whole lot of development in the community or even in the valley. But so, I mean, from a practical perspective, that's why I was referencing historical issues, the historical existing condition, and the existing conditions in the existing system. I'm not aware of any particular correspondence, indication of noncompliance, a citation or anything relative to what I'm characterizing as numerous, what amount to failures to comply with these proposed and existing ordinances. And I mean, this is something that I've been concerned about personally for several years, and I haven't really seen any resolution because what County Fire says exactly what you said. This is the responsibility of the water, but it's the fire department's responsibility for making sure that the components and the elements and the agencies and the individuals can comply, and the permit holders and the property owners can comply with the requirements of the ordinance. This isn't only for new construction. So I'm at a loss to understand how we are going to be able to comply with some of these requirements as time goes on, when I don't feel we're getting the help from County Fire to get the water company to provide what is a fire life safety requirement.
Steve, do you want to say?
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Please.
I'm trying to understand Mr. Ulrich's line of questioning in terms of how it reflects specifically to this agenda item. So,
Section 102,
and I understand the
B102
concerns.
and definitions.
And I'm not suggesting for a moment that the concerns raised by Mr. Ulrich do not have merit, or that those concerns, may or may not be out there. However, I feel like maybe we're getting a bit into the operational side of things. And so again, I'm just trying to understand the context of your questions and for this item.
These standards and requirements for flow rates of fire flow
Right.
rates are in at least 6 locations in these ordinances.
Okay.
So if you're going to, even if it's already adopted, every time you re-adopt something, you
Sure.
are either confirming and affirming, or you're revising,
Absolutely.
notwithstanding. At this
Correct.
particular point, we're here to adopt something, and I'm asking, I wasn't here 3 years ago. I'm asking the question, how are we supposed to adopt something that we can't comply with?
Actually, if I may, it's not the really adoption, just to be clear. The only thing before you today is a recommendation for approval or disapproval to the City Council to ratify Chapter 9, only Chapter 9, by a resolution. The rest of the ordinance, 29 and 30, has already been adopted for your city and other cities in the county that we have jurisdiction over. The only thing before you is Chapter 9. because that's the building standard that the law requires us to come to every city that we provide fire protection to ratify.
Right, and fire flow is within Chapter 9,
Okay?
Ordinance 30. So hence my question. I'm not talking about the global resolution, I'm talking about the building
If you can
standard component.
Yeah, if you can refer me to a specific section of it, then I can look that up, then we can have probably more specific.
All right,
discussion.
I'll let you get started then, and when I can give you a couple of sections, I will do so.
Yeah, actually, I really don't have a whole lot to talk about. This is, I mean, it's hard to believe 3 years have gone by really quick, and I'm here again before you, kind of going over what we have done 3 years ago. But I'm just, like I said, I'm here to just answer questions, urge you to approve or recommend approval to the city council for Chapter 9. And I know last year we had a lot of questions, we went over those, and nothing really has changed from the previous code to this code. It's practically the same. So I'm just here to answer your questions.
If I could, I would recommend maybe just briefly go through and explain what the, what it is that you're asking, what it is in Chapter 9 that goes above and beyond the state code.
Sure.
And why the county is recommending that the city ratify that. That would be helpful,
Sure.
I think, for us to understand the county's position.
Sure. The main part that we are looking at right now, the state already requires sprinklers in all residential occupancies, single-family homes. And that part, we have it in our ordinance, but already the state does that, so there's really no difference. The part that begins to kind of separate a little bit when you look at some of the additions. And right now, we have additions to residential occupancies that are more than 50% and over 1,000 square foot to require sprinklers throughout the entire structures. And when it comes in a commercial building, when the addition is 25% or more, requires sprinklers additions. There are requirements in the code when a commercial building gets sprinklered based on the type of occupancy and other factors. In our ordinance, all structures get fire sprinklered in a commercial buildings.
Okay,
Those are the big differences that you're looking at.
Okay, and help me with this, and you probably don't have all 248 pages like I do to look at, so
No, actually, the only pages you really have to look at is 17 through 20th. That's it.
Well,
It's the only part that is really, I didn't want to provide you a lot of stuff that, again, just being more specific, 17 through 20 is
Then maybe,
Chapter 9.
maybe you can help me, because I read through this and I looked at it, and then I pulled what we talked about a number of years ago, and I read what we did a number of years ago, and I actually have that if you need it. I'm looking at the new one on Attachment A, and we can do it one or two ways. I don't really know which is the best. We can look at page 39, as it says 39 on the attachment, or page 28.
I would recommend that we refer to the code section numbers.
Oh, that's what I'm going to do. I'm telling them which page it's
Didn't
on.
bring the entire
Yeah,
ordinance
and
with me.
I
just
also
brought-
have a handout that the fire marshal provided. I'd be happy to hand
Okay.
it out to you at this point, too. That might also help keep
it's-
us on the same page. It's the same.
Renee gave me the whole ordinance, so
Okay.
go ahead.
We're on item 75, 903.1.5. And item 76, 903.1.6.
Correct.
And what I'd
That's
like,
actually within the Chapter 9, okay?
yeah, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have you go back over that again, just so we can get an understanding of where we are specifically.
Sure.
As I look,
Is there a specific
that
question you have with
Yes.
regards?
yes,
those-
because
yes.
when I look at the Appendix L and the information we have from May 13th, 2014, and when I look at the one we have now, I'm not being able to match those up. So I'm looking at two different sets here. What I see under item 76, I'll start first, 903.1 9.6, and this may be irrelevant. I'm not disputing any of the things. I'm just simply asking for clarification.
Sure, absolutely.
What this means and what effect it has.
That's what I'm here for, absolutely.
903.1.6, previously exempting any existing building with less than 701 square feet of floor area. And it goes on to say, they were previously exempted from fire sprinklers that would have been required to mitigate fire flow, access requirements, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And so what it then goes in to say that any change would then require sprinklers. Am I reading that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so any change, so if
For
somebody
commercial
adds.
building, not
No,
residential.
no, I understand that,
Let me make
because I heard just a minute ago 25% on a commercial building or certain change of occupancies, and now I see 701 if they add anything. And-
Correct.
And so those are the things I'm really concerned with, because they seem like they directly conflict.
Well,
What I read and what I hear and what I see, because then I go to the next one and it's like, yep, but if it's,
unfortunately, that's how codes are written, sorry about
that's
that.
very
But-
unfortunate.
I know.
And,
but
and
let
what's,
me-
and what is the reason? Because this is above state code?
No, because in previous.
No, is this above state code?
It is, in some
Okay,
extent.
so
it is.
it's above state code, so there's a purpose for doing this.
Yes,
This
there's
is
a
not
purpose.
just,
No, there's a purpose for that.
okay, what can that be?
In previous ordinances that we required exemption of sprinklers for those smaller occupancies of buildings, 700 square foot or so buildings. We mitigated for the fire flow and all these other requirements that was required. Now we are saying is that if those small ones that they took advantage of back then, of not requiring fire sprinklers back then, for those particular ones, if they add any square footage, those need to come back and comply and put sprinklers in. Because it's just like saying, well, I'm going to take advantage of this law, and I'm going to build this, but I'm not going to put sprinklers in. You can, but later on, understanding that if you're going to come and add to it, the sprinkler requirements are going to come into place.
Okay.
At the time, it wasn't required because we gave something away for that.
Okay,
Now,
so
if you're going to add to it, now you're going to require it.
I'm good. So let's kind of delineate a number of things. It's going to be like a kaleidoscope. When we get into the residential and when we get into the commercial, we talk about different factors in different areas and different structures. What my understanding is, and again, I'm not going to dispute any of this stuff, I don't really know what it is, and so that's why I'm asking.
Sure.
In a residence, it's 1,000 square feet. If they, to start with, if we make 1,000 square foot change, or if we go over 25%,
50%.
50%?
For
Okay,
residential, it's 50%.
Then they're going to have to sprinkler the addition only?
No, the entire. Well, let me explain the
Because when I
1,000.
read that, it looked like it was not a rule. It looked like it was a recommendation. In fact, I think you're quoted in saying that we would recommend that the rest of the house be retrofitted, even though the new portion needs to be sprinklered. I can find that passage in here.
No, it's not a recommendation, but let me just explain about the 1,000 square feet, just so we're
Okay.
clear. The best way I can do it is probably with an example. Let's say you have, 800 square foot structure,
Residential.
residential. You got an 800 square foot, 400 square foot becomes a 50%. Let's say you want to add 401 square foot. That is not, it is over 50%, but it's not 1,000 square foot, so it doesn't require any sprinklers throughout the structure. See what I mean? It has to hit the threshold of 1,000 and the 50% in order to trigger the sprinkler requirements. So it's actually going to it's actually advantageous to the applicant in that respect. So for those small structures that they're trying to add to it, they're not going to be.
They need to stay
requiring
under 1,000 feet and under 50%.
You have to go hit the 1,000 and the 50% before it triggers the sprinkler requirements. So
Okay.
for those small ones, you can be over 50%, but you're not 1,000, so it doesn't require it. Or for that
And-
800 square foot example I gave you, you can add 100%, and that's another 800 square foot, you're still not going to require because hasn't reached the 1,000 square foot
Okay,
threshold.
and we're on that one. Let's go to the next one. Item 75-903.1.5.
Yes.
And this talks about 5,000 square feet.
Okay, way back when,
November 1, 2002, right? That's the
Yes.
date.
our ordinance used to require only sprinklers in structures that were over 5,000 square feet. At the time, they were also allowed to install a separation wall to break it into a smaller square foot if they were exceeding that 5,000. Let's say they had an 8,000 square foot building, that it would have required sprinklers. The ordinance allowed them to install a separation wall to break it into two 4,000 square foot so they didn't have to provide sprinklers. What we found out later is that as the year went by, people start breaching that separation wall without knowing, unintentionally, and basically null and voided the requirements. So what it's saying is going back to maintaining those firewalls for those existing buildings that way back in the 2002 they were required, or before 2002 they were required, or they were allowed to have a separation wall to break it into a smaller structure.
So let me give you an example that I'm thinking of. I don't know if this is correct or not.
Sure.
You got a 4,200 square foot home, you got a 1,000 square foot.
This is not a home. This is commercial building.
No, I've got that. I'm going to talk about homes. We used to have a 5,000 square foot rule on homes.
Yes.
You have a 4,200 square foot house, you got a 1,000 square foot garage, it's all under a single roof. For those purposes of those buildings that did not have fire sprinklers, and we have lots of them, if they convert to garage and now you have a single unit of 5,200 square feet, is the entire home, is it necessary then to fire sprinkler the entire home? And is that a state, or is this just Appendix L? I'm trying to figure out where we are in this thing.
The state only deals with new constructions,
Okay,
sprinklers in new construction. The state is silent on additions, modifications, things like that.
okay.
Our ordinance deals with additions, modifications like that.
Okay.
That's for residential again, back
In
talking
that
to
example, when you're expanding the living space from 4,200 to 5,200, it's already under a single roof.
Right.
It's just enclosing, converting the garage. Is that going to
If
trigger
the
sprinklers?
addition- If the addition to an existing square footage is not over 1,000 and is not over 50%, it does
okay.
not trigger the sprinkler requirement.
Okay, so then we don't have that upper 5,000 square foot
That's
number.
correct.
Okay, it's one of the two.
That's correct.
Okay,
It has to hit both, 1,000 and 50%, like the example I just mentioned.
okay. Tom, you have some questions that get answered?
Yeah.
Okay. Dale?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Item 39, which is Chapter 2, and it looks like it's just 202.
Item
This-
30,
Yeah, this,
39?
yeah, it's on page,
kind of gets
it's
me
it's
out
on
of the-
page 15,
Chapter
kind
9.
of, 15 or 26. I don't know which one of the two page numbers you want to use. It's very simple, it's just two sentences, pretty easy. Building existing, bolded, a building erected prior to the adoption of this code or one for which a legal building permit has been issued. The second part of that, building new, difference between building existing, a building erected after the adoption. So when we're talking about adoption of this code,
January 1st.
this is going to be January 1st, 2017.
That's correct, with the,
Okay, no,
it's January 1st,
Just-
2017, and I'm really.
I just want to make sure we didn't go back to Appendix 1.
No. And
So- and I'm
kind of
looking for that date and time.
No, and I'm kind of emphasizing this is because it's important. The city council has to, or we like to, have them vote on this resolution by December 15th, so this becomes effective January 1st. Last time, We were not able to do it January 1st, and we were all the way up to March or April, I believe. So we are hoping to kind of avoid that if we can.
What are Group U occupancies?
Group U is more of like a utility carport, a small shed in the side of a house built. It's more of a kind of a catch-all that doesn't fall into other type of categories.
Okay.
Fences, carports.
Storage sheds,
Yeah, storage shed,
gazebos, okay.
carports, things like that, fence.
So what this says is that as long as you have a utility shed under 400 square feet, that's going to be item 78, 903.2. If somebody puts a utility shed in over 400 square feet or a detached garage over 400 feet, are we currently requiring under this Appendix L proposed?
I'm sorry, let me go to that item first. Item 78, 903.2.
Yes.
Okay, let me grab that for a second. Okay, I'm sorry. Basically, it says notwithstanding the provisions of 901 through blah, 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 okay. An approved automatic fire system shall be installed in buildings and structures as follows. And exception is A, Group U occupancy when approved by the fire code official. Yes, when approved by the fire code official, because sometimes Group U have to be careful what is it being classified as and how it's going to affect. So it's not blanket all. We have to look at it and see what is it exactly they're doing, what is it being stored, what is it that their purpose of that is. Like I said, Group U is more of a catch-all in that respect.
This can be commercial or this can be personal use?
Yeah,
It can
any
be a
group.
garage or it can be
Any
a
group.
growing structure, what do they call those?
Yeah.
Garden houses?
Any Group U type of occupancy.
Hot house, okay.
Hot house,
I guess it's a pot house now, right?
it's too general to be able to just fit in and say, you can or cannot put sprinklers. That's why we leave it to the fire code official, because we have to look at it a little more detail. as to
And
what
you're
it
going to
is.
take in the 30-foot separation, the other types of
Yeah,
things.
we have to look at it a little
And they're going to make changes that.
Right, it's not so blanket out for
Okay.
that.
I'm going to get back to this fire flow thing. I actually have every single fire hydrant flow and every line flow and every map.
I'm sorry, is there a section in the chapter 9 you're referring to?
Certainly, we're going to look at
In chapter 9?
section B102, B102-1
So we are,
definitions for purpose of this appendix. And
So
for
we are now-
purpose of this appendix, this is our own county Appendix L. This has got nothing to do with the state, correct? I want to make sure that I'm not moving out of our
okay.
realm.
I just want to make sure we are leaving chapter 9,
Are we leaving Chapter 9?
because that's what, I want to make sure that we are, yeah, because we're out of chapter 9 now, okay?
Page 41 or page 52, whichever one you want to look at. It's both page. They got two numbers.
I'm sorry, what specific question? Oh, what
The
specific
specific
section?
question is.
Section, I'm sorry, first.
It's B102.1 definitions.
Okay,
And it talks about fire flow rate
yes.
of 20 pounds per square inch, and it talks about residential pressure for firefighting.
Residual pressure.
Residual pressure. Is there a gauge that's done prior to somebody applying for permit? Do we have a rule, Renee, you can help me also, Fire Marshal?
Typically, water companies, many years ago, they used to actually flow the hydrant to measure the flow. But water, as scarce as it is, typically these days they use hydraulic modeling. They use computer programs, hydraulic modeling, to determine what the fire flow is at their different hydrant within their grid system.
Well, there was somebody here at the end of town that went ahead and couldn't get flow for sprinklers. And it makes sense to me that somewhere in this thing is that there's a determination made prior rather than after, because once it's an after, you're pretty much stuck, aren't you?
I wouldn't say stuck, but it is much more difficult perhaps to deal with if it is after you.
Okay, so how integral is this definition? How hard and fast, how critical is this? Is this a reason to deny? If somebody gets a structure up there and we do a flow test and they can't do this,
That's correct.
are we going to deny them occupancy?
If they can meet the fire flow for firefighting purposes, then the building will not get finalized. And actually, well, if we find out early enough, we wouldn't even be permitted to move forward. They have to be, water company has to guarantee that they're going to meet the fire flow before, as we move forward through the permitting process. That's one of the earliest stages of our permitting process.
And so when we send the fire department out there and actually do a bucket test, see, that's what I'm trying to figure out. There's no way to get Golden State,
Bucket tests that we're talking about, the residential,
right?
it's far less than this requirement for fire flow. Fire flow is what we get out of a fire hydrant
Okay,
when a building is involved in a fire. That's considered fire flow.
okay,
The bucket test is how much water you get out of a sprinkler head,
okay,
which is far less.
Right.
You are talking about only 13 gallons a minute out of a sprinkler head versus a fire flow that can run to 500 gallons or 1,000 gallons a minute out of a hydrant. So there's a big difference between a 500 and 1,000 to a 13 gallon.
So in the instance where we had that one, then they could,
It's really the installation of the sprinkler systems and the way, typically I've seen in the past, they're able to fix it by looping their water line a little more inside the building, by increasing the pipe sizes. They have been able to meet the requirements.
water tank,
I'm sorry?
water tank? Will a water tank on premise suffice?
No, it doesn't. Water tank doesn't do anything to pressure.
Okay,
Pump it does. They can install a pump to meet the pressure.
if you have power,
But what I'm trying to say is, what you're referring to, a bucket test, is for testing sprinkler systems in a building which far less water requirements is than what you're looking at this, where it says section 102 fire flow. That doesn't apply. That is not what that is for.
okay, do we have any other questions of the fire marshal? We have some speakers. Yes?
I do, if I may. Could you help me understand a little bit more? I'm a bit off here in terms of understanding the request, in terms of the urgency and the timing. You had mentioned requesting, wanting the council, if they were going to take up these amendments, if they were to do so, that they would need to take action by no later than December 15th.
Sure.
So typically, when city adopts an ordinance, there's a 30-day effective date. So I'm trying to, could you maybe
Sure.
explain all that timing a little bit better for myself and the board?
Sure. We have already gone to the Board of Supervisors and were approved, as a matter of fact, on Tuesday before the board. And that approval.
Tuesday, I
Last
think
Tuesday.
25th, correct?
Yesterday. And actually, 25th was for the ordinance 30, and yesterday was for ordinance 29.
Thank you.
So both of the
Okay.
ordinances. Both 29 and 30 has been adopted already by the board. So that is giving us enough time for January 1st to become effective. The part that we are doing since yesterday is going through every city that is under our jurisdiction to ask for ratification through a resolution only for Chapter 9. And once that ratification is done, then 15 days after it becomes effective. We have already on a schedule for all the cities, well before December 15th with all the city council meetings. And my hope is that we can do the same well before December 15th. So we have that 15-day period. So when it comes January 1st, we can effectively enforce our ordinance, including Chapter 9, throughout the county uniformly.
I guess I'm a little lost on you keep referring to a 15-day period. What are you referring back to?
That's for the ratification of the resolution, ratification of Chapter 9. That I think it requires 15 days before we can enforce that as well.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Renee and I were trying to read through the state code provisions on this, and it's a bit confusing, especially when you have multiple jurisdictions involved to try and tease out the code. So, we'll follow up with the city attorney just to make sure that staff is clear on those.
That has been my understanding. There's a 15-day period before it becomes effective.
And
for
that the other cities
ratification.
are making those ratifications via resolution, not ordinance.
Via resolution, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Actually, Thousand Oaks was done last night, so.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Fire Marshal, do you have anything else to add?
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Like I said, I'm hoping your recommendation is for approval to the city council, and we move forward with it. I appreciate it.
Of course, we just make a recommendation. We don't make.
I understand, but that's why I'm seeking your recommendation for approval.
One of the things that happened the last time, I guess, which is still here, we got information not from you, but we had some information from council, a council, that the entire cost of the sprinkler system was $2,000. I checked with sprinkler company, and what I was told is that the permit and that the study and the permit for them to draw everything up would be $2,000. Do we have any cost impact that it's $1 a square foot, it's $5 a square foot? If somebody has a little local restaurant where they in fact added a little patio back there in the arcade, and it's in the old 700 feet and they add 100 square feet, are we talking a couple of $1,000 impact to commercial? $10,000, $20,000 impact? Is there any way to know what kind of an impact adopting this, and again, this is above state law, so if it's not adopted, state law is going to make them do nothing, correct?
Yeah, just go back to that
Sure.
example you just said, 700
Yeah.
square foot restaurant. That 700 square foot we talked about most likely doesn't apply to that restaurant. It's 25% in those cases probably that will be applied. I mean, imagine if they're adding a 25% to an existing restaurant, that's when it triggers the sprinkler requirements for
Okay,
that.
it's only 25. I thought it was if they
That's 700
added anything to the 700.
That 700 square foot is very specific to way back when there was some specific type of occupancy, very small ones.
Yeah, Reuben's Burritos.
Utility type of buildings that they were required or whatever, they were exempt from sprinklers, and now they're adding square footage. The example you just said, like a restaurant, is probably 25%. If they're adding a 100 square foot patio in the back, that's not going to require.
No, not a patio. I mean, like popping out the back of the building.
They're popping out more than 25% of their existing, it does. But if it don't, it doesn't.
Okay,
No.
I need to read that again, because I thought this thing said on commercial, if you make any change above the 700 square feet, you have to sprinkle it.
Only those buildings that were previously exempt under previous codes. That restaurant you're referring to was not previously exempt, so therefore it doesn't fall under that category. It falls on the category of the 25%. That 700 square foot and having an exemption for that is very specific to those type of instances that they were previously exempt. Restaurant wouldn't have been exempt previously. It would have required sprinklers if at the time when they were built, that if it fell under the requirements of the code, previous codes. So that doesn't apply to that particular case. A restaurant wouldn't fall into that 700 square foot. It will fall under the 25% requirement.
Clothing store, next door,
Same
700
probably-
square foot.
Probably the same example as that. It won't.
Okay.
That 700 square foot is very specific, like I said, not clothing store, not.
I'm just thinking of the arcade, that's all.
It doesn't.
That's
It doesn't.
a 100-year-old building.
For the arcade, it won't.
Okay.
It won't. But let me kind of go back to what you just said about the arcade or about the cost. I don't know the exact cost, what it will be.
Okay.
I don't know exact cost of what the drawing is going to be. I haven't researched that. I haven't talked to anybody about it. But cost to me is somewhat relative. I mean, you figure someone who has lost his business or his home or has lost a loved one in a fire, to that person, cost doesn't mean anything. It's just priceless. Having a sprinklers in their home, protecting their loved ones and their property is priceless. For others who have not been through this experience, perhaps they look at the cost, and it's our job to educate those as to why we think it's important. Example of arcade as we're talking about downtown Ojai. Ojai, that's the economic engine of Ojai. If you have a fire in that area and you lose multiple structures, the impact, the socioeconomic impact to the community is huge. So we should be looking at every possibility to provide sprinklers for those areas, to provide protection for those areas, either through providing, and if the cost is an issue, we should be looking at grants or other type of way we can have money coming in to help those people provide sprinklers. And that's how, again, my personal view and my 29 years experience in fire service and seeing multiple fires and having a background as a fire protection engineer, I can tell you I've seen multiple times what sprinklers does in the case of a fire, how they save the property, how they save lives. And to go beyond that, when you look at sprinklers, you talk about water. Right now, there were a lot of discussions about drought and saving water. Sprinklers is a great water saving. When you have a fire in a building, imagine a 13 gallons a minute that is going to put the fire out versus a structure that doesn't have sprinklers that you're using 1,000 gallons a minute for perhaps 10, 15 minutes. You're talking about 10, 20,000 gallons of water to put that fire out.
Hopefully, in this town.
Yeah. So
With our system, hopefully, we've
well,
got that.
But it requires a lot of water.
Right.
So even if we bring water tender, that water has to come from somewhere. We are using a lot of water to put the fire out. So imagine the difference of the water usage, and imagine the runoff from the sprinklers. The dirty water, the contaminated water that's going to run off to the ocean. Imagine the impact to the environment. The smoke and plume and all these toxic gases are just being spewed to the atmosphere. So when you look at sprinklers, it goes far beyond property protection and life saving. It goes into water saving, environment protection, and socioeconomic impact that a fire has. So I believe we as collectively, as people in charge of saving the city and providing services to the city, we collectively need to work together to find ways to improve and to their safety and to promote fire sprinklers. This is one way for us to do it.
Okay,
And
thank you.
that's-
Mr. McClary, do you have any way of knowing, we should have permits, I don't know if we have a way of knowing, do we have any way of knowing how many of our commercial buildings are sprinklered? When I look at the Golden State information, it's inconclusive. When I look and see what they have, it's inconclusive. We have changed from needing bigger meters, smaller meters, additional meters, and so we're kind of all over the place on what that standard is.
So the question is, how many commercial buildings currently have sprinklers, fire protection sprinklers in the city of Ojai?
Yeah, commercial.
Well, we've never looked into that.
I don't have that number, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm off the top of my head, I don't know if we have that data. Obviously, if we have the data, then we could compile it, but I don't know.
Okay, have we been required, have we been requiring, and let's talk about different occupancies. Ruben's Burrito's not here. The sporting goods store is not here, changed over 3 times. The numerous buildings have changed. Numerous occupancies have changed hands. When we have an occupancy change hands, that's not too crazy. It's not a restaurant, it's a mercantile serve. Are we requiring sprinklers now?
So we would follow. The fire department has a memo for us. The state has given the fire department kind of purview over certain occupancy classifications, which would be assembly, restaurants, schools, multifamily dwellings, and that kind of stuff. So any of those projects come in, or if a business came in that was now a restaurant, used to be a mercantile, that would go to the fire department in the plan check process for their review. If a mercantile business came in and it was previously a mercantile business, we would not send that to the fire department for review. In the plan
When
check
we say
process.
restaurant, we're talking about open flame cooking, correct?
Anything that you would define doesn't have to be open flame.
Okay, we have a new
There's
kimchi
serving-
restaurant.
If they're serving food and would be considered a restaurant under the, classification, eating and drinking is how the building code kind of puts it, then that would technically be a restaurant. But they have to meet a minimum threshold of the number of people in it, which is 50 or more, to be considered an assembly occupancy. And assembly occupancies are the ones that go to the fire department. So that new restaurant that you're talking about did not go to the fire. They don't have an occupant load over 50.
Okay. So I guess what my interest would be is how many actual commercial buildings would actually be affected by this? We can take a look at 300 and say it might be 10. We can take a look at 300 and just not know where it is. So I don't have any way of understanding the impact. So, okay, I think what we need to do in the interest of time is, I have some speaker cards.
Before
Sure.
break, if you don't mind, the code hasn't really changed much from last time. So to look at the impact, all you have to look at the last 3 years. What has been the impact? That's what the impact is going to be for the next 3 years. It's not a whole lot for the city. The other part I want to make sure I mention, because you guys have asked a question about the fire flow. When you install sprinklers in a building, that reduces your requirement for fire flow dramatically down. 50% or I believe it's 75% in the code. That by itself is a huge saving, is a huge benefit. A fire flow requirement will be reduced by that much when you put sprinklers in a building. And the reason is, if you have a building that is fire sprinklered, the fire will be out at the earliest stage. You don't need much water to fight it. But when you don't, you need a lot more. So when we're concerned about fire flow, sprinklers is the best way to reduce that requirement.
All right, thank you. We're running out of time, and I got a bunch of people
Appreciate
here
it.
that have their rights
All
to
right, thank
speak.
you.
So, Mr. Maynard, do you still have,
Wayne Maynard, resident of Gridley Road, and thank you for letting me back up and talk. So now I have a better understanding what it is we're talking about here. It appears to me that the item before you is the ratification of the fire district's requirements that are more restrictive than the state for the fire sprinklers. And so I have experience. I'm retired from the fire department. During my tenure, the fire department did a lot of code development work in the state and national levels. The state requires that before the fire district is allowed to enforce their more restrictive requirements, that because they're a fire district, they have to go to the legislative authority of the jurisdiction and get their approval to enforce their regulations within your jurisdiction. And then that's done by ratification, typically by a resolution. So I think that's what we're talking about. So I think really the only issue before you is the requirements that the fire district's proposing that are more restrictive than the state. And what I get out of it is They're basically requiring all commercial buildings, new buildings have to be fire sprinklered. They're requiring any additions to commercial buildings that are more than 25%. Those additions trigger a retrofit requirement for fire sprinklers. And then they also require, the other difference that I see is a retrofit requirement for residents when that exceeds 1,000 square feet, if the addition exceeds 1,000 square feet, and 50%. That's kind of what I get out of it. So those are really the only items that the district, I think, is looking for approval to enforce those in the city. Now, a little bit less than 3 years ago, the item came to this board, and the way I recall is that the board made the recommendation to the city council not to approve the fire district's ordinance to be enforced in the city. And the city council, when they heard the item, they overturned that recommendation and they approved the ordinance to be enforced with the exception of the requirement to retroactively enforce or a retroactive requirement in residence. That's the way I remember it. So,
I have the minutes.
is that how you remember it?
No, but
Okay.
that's okay.
All
Go
right.
ahead, I'm not here to put words in your mouth.
Okay, well, that's the way I recall it. So, I'm a fire sprinkler advocate. I think that we have the technology now to protect people's lives and property. And I think that it's a benefit that fire sprinklers put in residences. I had an item that I wanted to also, I found that in April 5th, there was a fire on Matilaha Street in a duplex. And that fire caused both of those units to be posted, red tagged for not allowing occupancy. And here we are in November, and it looks the same way it did the day after the fire. Everything's boarded up, and those two units are vacant, and we've just basically lost 2 units of affordable housing for however long it has been. You know, if buildings were sprinklered, that's just another benefit. It allows, when there's a fire, to reoccupy it pretty quickly. You don't have, I don't know why it's taken so long, but I've seen it many times where it does take a long time to get those buildings rebuilt.
Mr. Maynard, you're getting past your 3 minutes here. Sorry.
Okay.
Do you have anything else to add?
Well, my recommendation is that you approve the fire district's recommendation to adopt the fire sprinkler requirements that they're proposing.
Okay, thank you. We have item 3, but we're not to item 3 yet, and we're not to item 4. Mr. Quillisi, do you have anything that you'd like to say at this time or questions? Mr. Merck, do you have anything that's of interest to the Planning Commission that you'd like to say? Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the minutes of the council meeting from this last go-round, just so we're very accurate. And this meeting is January 14th, 2014. Discussion item 4 on that agenda was the adoption of Resolution 14 ratifying Ventura County Protection District Ordinance Number 28, Appendix L, to the building standards for application within the jurisdictional boundaries of the city of Ojai. It went into a number of the things we went into about the state allows sprinklers for commercial, certain hazards and occupancies, and it went on to ask a number of questions, and this was then sent to the Board of Appeals. It said the motion was moved, Mitalara, seconded by Councilman Blatz, to send this to the Board of Appeals. This thing came back up before the City Council, And I'm trying to get the exact standards in here, where the vote was 2 for adoption and 3 for denial, with Smith and Council Clapp voting for acceptance. So I just kind of wanted to make sure that we have that correction. And what they did then is what they did then. We had nothing to do with this at that time, as far as I know. So what I'm going to ask is they're asking that we vote to recommend this to the city council for acceptance. Do I have any other discussion from the board? Anything anybody would like to say?
I would, given an observation, that in items 71 through 79, if I do my math, that's eight items. The purpose rationale given, it specifically references in, once again, 8 of the 9, that the sprinkler provision of Appendix L in Ordinance 28 has been moved into Chapter 9 of this ordinance to consolidate them with the fire sprinkler provisions contained in the model code. Now, since that appears to be what I characterize as the intent, given that it's described as the purpose and rationale, and this was an issue at the last adoption, I'm going to say my observation, and this is just my personal opinion, that this is an administrative effort to introduce Appendix L into Chapter 9, which is the only thing that we're looking at. And from a practical perspective, while I appreciate the urgency and I appreciate the fire marshal's stated concerns, which I agree with almost completely, but for, in some instances, different reasons, that I get that the fire district would really like to see Appendix L adopted by this city. But every time I look at this, I see what would be reasonable exemptions to existing structures described in a manner that my experience in the building permitting process will produce requirements for review by the fire department, as well as interpretation by the city building official that may have unintended impacts and consequences to folks who don't understand how expensive fire sprinklers are. And I can say that from my personal experience. I realize every time the questions come up of how much does this cost on a square footage basis, everybody steps back from it. And I recognize that the fire department's not responsible for that to be concerned, and oftentimes neither is the building department. The reality of the situation, however, is to an end user and to the folks that are concerned about maintaining fire life safety, their own, their loved ones. These are impacts that don't get addressed in the course of the promotion of something for adoption by a city, a municipality, as well as the practical impacts and considerations to the community at large. So I just making that observation that this is a pretty pronounced push from an administrative perspective to get Appendix L in this time. And while I don't I'm not necessarily opposed to it, I'm also not necessarily for it. I'm just making that observation. Thank you.
Mr. Farmer?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that I think that we all understand that fire sprinklers are definitely a necessity. But I know that this came up, I think 3 years ago when we talked about the cost of fire sprinkling houses and what have you, and somebody came up with a figure, I think $1,900 or $2,000. And it's just unfortunate that we don't have any kind of an estimate from, let's say, a couple of fire sprinkler companies on what impact it would have on potential applicants, or those people that fall under this umbrella of having to go back and retrofit. I am in favor of it. It's just that I think it would have a burden on some of the people who would have to come back and retrofit their houses. Thank you.
Ms. Hanson?
Yes, I agree with what the other two speakers have said. Until we know more about it, I think that the cost and the burden, I don't doubt that there's some benefit that comes as having sprinklers, but I don't know enough about it, and I don't think we know enough about it to say that that I would not want to go forward with it right now. I think that, as Tom said, that perhaps we need to get some costs from some sprinkler companies, some people that install this, and get the costs of that and see how it impacts.
I'm going to go ahead and read verbatim from the May 13, 2014 regular meeting. And there's a couple of things. The reason I'm going to do this is because there's something that's still out there that we need to have resolved. Discussion item 3, Community Development Director Wold presented administrative report. Council Member Blatt stated Appendix L is not being enforced by the city. Staff said that was correct. Mayor Pro Tem Smith said it was to apply to new buildings and second units and not existing structures. Mayor Strobel asked if the city wished to modify Appendix L, and I'm not sure if this is a typo, it would no longer be enforced by the fire department. There's an if left out of there somewhere. County Fire Marshal said if the city wishes to modify Appendix L, it would then become the city's responsibility to review applications and enforce whatever requirements are stated. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to stop for just a minute and ask the fire marshal, is that correct that the fire department is not enforcing and that the city is required for all enforcement of anything that would be entitled in Appendix L? And is that the old Appendix L that's not in the Title IX Appendix L?
Just for simplicity, we moved Appendix L to Chapter 9 to coincide with Chapter 9 in the Fire Code. So it's more of an administrative kind of move.
And it's not being enforced by the fire department at this time, correct?
Well, because the city did not ratify
No, I just
resolution.
Okay.
And like I said, we're trying to change that this time around. We're trying to add and be able to enforce, just like the rest of the county, that we could enforce Appendix 9 or Chapter 9, I should say.
Okay.
Through a resolution.
Okay. Mr. Maynard, thank you very much, Fire Marshal. Mr. Maynard, could I ask get a follow-up answer? I guess I need to go and see my optometrist. I drive down Matilla Street all the time. We have a duplex that caught fire that is no longer in use. Is that correct? Or is it two separate houses? You mentioned that.
I've got a picture on my phone. It appears to be a duplex.
Okay, and where would that be? What block?
Didn't catch the address.
I mean, it's only between, Matilla's only between Foothill and Montgomery, correct?
I may have the street wrong. Maybe it's Aliso Street. I have to look.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
okay.
Yeah, it might be Aliso Street.
The other one you're talking about, I can't think of the
Okay.
Is that, you know the building I'm talking about?
Well, I remember the incident,
Yeah.
but I
Okay.
can't recall what.
So
street it's on.
in that incident, then we'd have to have 50% and 1,000-foot built on those little lots to add to the houses before we'd actually have an occurrence to have fire sprinklers, unless they voluntarily wanted to, which is always
Yeah, I
best.
don't think there's anything that's going to trigger fire sprinklers when they reopen or refurbish those buildings.
Okay.
My point was that if we had buildings that were fire sprinklered, that we wouldn't have those kind of losses.
Okay, super. Now I get that. I really appreciate it.
Right.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I could, I
It's
just wanted, I always try to
2:30.
provide clarification here.
Certainly.
Forgive me if I'm confusing or misunderstanding something. Just in reading, and maybe I missed something in your reading of the minutes from the May 13th, 2014 regular meeting. At least according to the minutes that we have here, there was a subsequent motion which passed 4-1. And the motion is a little unclear here because it states that it partially ratifying and modifying Ventura County Fire Protection District Ordinance Number 28, Appendix L, pertaining to building standards for application within the jurisdictional boundaries of the city. If I remember correctly, and I'm looking to all those in the room who may recall, the portion that the city took out of Appendix L was specific to the fire sprinkling. But if I understand this correctly, there were other portions of it that were put into
Can
effect at that point.
let me go back, and I actually have it in my hand here.
It
so-
may be a minor point, but
No, let's go back and actually read it. The motion, it was moved by Councilmember Blatt, seconded by Mayor Strobel, to adopt resolution number 14-17, partially ratifying and modifying. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that the fire marshal, I having read what the preceding documents were and statements, that if there was a modification, then it would not be enforced. It says, in modifying Ventura County Fire Protection District Ordinance Number 28, Appendix L, pertaining to building standards for application within the jurisdictional boundaries. And so, while it doesn't really say what we needed the minutes to actually say, it's like 28 was adopted, but L was left out, but it doesn't really
Well, right.
literally say that,
and-
but
and
that's
just-
what happened.
Yeah, and just to beat it completely to death, certainly the council action wouldn't have been to modify the ordinance that the county adopted. It would have been to ratify those sections that the council chose to ratify.
Right.
But I think we beat that to death.
But it looks like it was out, and Laura voted no, the rest of them voted yes, is what I see. Are you looking at the same?
Yes, I'm looking at attachment B, page 7 of 11, that was in the packet. It's
Right, okay.
page 7 of the May
Right.
13th, 2014
Here,
regular
you can
city
have
council
that if you
meeting.
like. Okay, Ms. Hanson, do you have anything else to say? I'm going to let her finish before, and we're going to take a vote before we go back again for the third time. Yes, ma'am. We're going to take a vote in a minute. What would you like, have you said anything else that you'd like to say?
No. Well, yes, but not now.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and wait for Mr. Farmer to come back, and then I'm going to ask for a motion and a vote, and we're going to go ahead and conclude this meeting today, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put some things on for the next agenda item, so we can understand what the urgency issue and what the recommendation, to give the council a heads up. And then I will talk with you and the building official to determine what's left over, because we got the building code.
Correct.
And you tell me what the urgency is. If you need us to meet next week on the code, we will be here next week on the code if you'll tell us specifically what you'd like us to engage in, if anything.
Okay, it won't be next week, so.
Well,
we'll
it
let
can
you
be
know.
the week after. Whatever week you need, we'll be here.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, except for December 6th. I've got rotator cuff surgery, so I'll be out for a few days on that one. Mr. Farmer? Okay, we're concluding this, and I'm going to ask for, we have a request by the fire department, by the county fire department, for us to accept I'm going to say ordinance 28 with the changes to chapter 9. Is that correct? No. Okay, please. State the motion for me.
It would be a recommendation to approve Appendix 9 of ordinance 30.
Appendix 9.
I'm sorry.
Chapter 9.
Repeat back.
Okay.
It gets confusing, you're right. Let me just start again. The recommendation, or what I'm here to seek, your recommendation for approval
Okay.
to City Council to ratify Chapter 9 of Ordinance 30 through a resolution.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do I have a motion, or do I'm gonna need a motion, not from the fire marshal. I'm gonna need a motion from the board.
That's correct.
Would someone from the board like to make an up or down motion and float it past the board? Or make an up motion, we'll see if it goes, make a down motion, we'll see if it goes, either way.
I'd like to make a motion to continue the matter until we can get some further information regarding potential cost impacts and other impacts that are related to fire sprinkler
I'll second
installations
that.
of Chapter 9.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Mr. McClary, do you have anything that you would like to add prior to the vote?
So, no, I don't have anything to add at this point. I'll ask some clarifying questions if the motion is approved.
Okay, can I ask for some clarifying questions before we take the vote? I really have been against this type of legislation for the 20-plus years I've been here. I really don't like to ever have anything forwarded without a date certain for conclusion. And so what I would ask, if the maker of the motion would like to amend to a date certain, because I just, when, we can gather information till, forever. I don't like that. What I think we need to do is we need to address this matter, get on with it, and move it along. So what I think we need to do is, if you would state certain information, because it's vague, and you would state a time, so specific, as to the number of commercial sprinklered buildings, non-sprinklered buildings, residential sprinklers, whatever that information is we actually want, and then I need a deadline for us to get that and have a meeting. Is that fair?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Would you like to restate that or withdraw that?
Well, I mean, at this point, though, the date certain is based upon availability of the information and availability of the chamber for a meeting.
Okay, now, when we say availability, we can get the chamber, I'm sure, even if we have to start at 9 o'clock. But as far as the information, my recommendation or plea would be that information isn't always available. And if we cannot get that information, then I'd like to get a date certain where we could get staff to come back and say, we don't have that where we can go in and pull those. I don't want them to spend a lot of time and a lot of money. If it's something where they can tell us we're 5%, 50%, some number, and give us a number, and we can move on, that would add benefit. And if you would include in your motion, as I will ask Tom to maybe modify your motion. He made a recommendation, and I hope he would add that to your motion. So I'm going to let you go back and modify, and then I'm going to let you make your motion, then I'm going to ask Tom to modify it.
I'm sorry, before we go further, just so I want to add, last time we went through this, we provided three separate estimate from different contractors. I don't know if you have that or not, but we provided that last time we went through this motion. And I did.
We didn't have the benefit of that. We had the benefit of one council member saying that it was about $2,000, and that was followed up, and the answer was followed up with somebody told me. Mr. McClary?
Perhaps I can offer something that would be of help to the board. 2 weeks, I don't think it would be unreasonable. Say we try to meet back in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I think I understand what the board is looking for, a rough idea of
Conclusion.
the current commercial buildings that do have sprinklers, and then some type of an idea of what the cost would be to retrofit a building, because again, we're not talking about new construction here, we're talking about a retrofit. So we could contact several different companies, maybe get a variety in terms of the different scale.
And maybe we could just cruise through maybe the last 4 or 5 years, because we haven't done many, and find out how many building additions we've done that are 1,000 or 50%. I mean, we've got to have a way
Sure.
to keep track of what
Yeah.
we issue in permits, right?
Absolutely. We can do that.
Okay. With that, do you have anything else to add?
No, sir.
Okay. Mr.
I would-
Mr. Wyrick, would you like to?
That's the other
Ulrich.
guy,
That's
Ulrich,
the
yeah.
other. Would you like to modify this?
Yeah, I'd move that we continue this to a date certain in 2 weeks. That would make it the 17th or 18th. I can't do the 16th of November. 17th or 18th?
18th, I'll be back on the 18th.
Does 18th work?
18th, just make the motion.
It could be the next, the
Make-
next
make-
week if necessary. I move we could continue this matter till the 18th of November, or a date as close to that as possible.
And the board members can come in at 10 in the morning if we have to, or we can come in at 7 at night. We've got flexibility. 1 second. Okay, anything else with the rest of your motion?
No, I think it.
Okay. Mr. Farmer, you had a couple of things to add specific.
Let it be seconded.
Thank you.
I second.
The motion on the floor?
Yeah, you
You
have a second.
you have seconded already, and, okay, did you second the modification?
I do.
Okay. Mr. Farmer, you made a request. Has your
Yeah.
request been answered by the city manager that they will go ahead and get some cost estimates? You said that you wanted to see those, and has that been satisfied?
Well, first of all, we weren't privy to the estimates that the fire department was referring to. And, I realize that it's a safety issue, and there's no doubt in our minds that, or my mind, that fire sprinklers would have a definite effect on preventing any further damage or bodily harm. My only concern is that what's the cost to someone? And you indicated that, you can't replace a life and the cost, but, and I understand that, I do, believe you me. I don't know if it would change my not voting for it if I did know the cost, to be quite honest with you. I would, though, it would be nice to know the cost, but I guess I'm going on record, regardless of what the cost is, I would still be in favor of our recommendation. Thank you.
May I add something?
We have a motion and a second, and we're over time, and we've been doing this forever. Secretary, you want to call for a vote, restate Mr. Ulrich's motion?
Okay. My understanding of the, if I can get to it, is that Mr. Ulrich, I know I can do this. His motion is asking for a date certain, would be approximately November 18th, to
Gather more information.
to get more information on both the date and, on the amount, and I guess that's it. It's mostly on the amounts
And the number of occupancies.
and the number of occupancies.
Okay. Would you,
And
would
so a roll call?
would you call for a roll call, please?
Yes, roll call. Bill Ulrich,
Yes.
Tom Farmer,
No.
that would be me next, Dale Hansen, yes. And Chair Daddy?
Yes. So, please have staff contact me and let me know what we need or we can do, or when you have the information. And we'll get through this thing next time, and then we'll have everything we need. And we'll have our last member back at that time, and so we'll have a full board. And so with that, what I'd like to do is continue item 3 and 4, and we'll discuss for future. And actually, we should have been out of this room 15 minutes ago, so Complete Streets could have it. And I do apologize for that. Is there anything from the city, Mr.?
We moved Complete Streets into the conference room, so we did
okay.
make adjustments
Okay.
for that. So thank you, and we'll work on setting up the date and getting the information to you.
Okay, and we are cognizant of the urgency of this with the fire department. That's why we're gonna meet as quickly as we can, and council will still be in session. And then council has a meeting about a week or two after we're done, so we still have time to meet what they need to meet, and they have business in the middle, so, we're not putting this thing off until February. Okay? All right, thank you. We're concluded.